Okay, well, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us on this conversation about understanding demonstrated interest. Lisa Bain Carlton, Allison Randall, Bren Campbell, and I really welcome you to this conversation that we hope will be particularly helpful in understanding this summer and fall, how students can engage in this topic that oftentimes can be somewhat complicated. Two housekeeping notes, please. Many of you are Zoom veterans. Please feel free to shoot us a question as we go. We'll try to make sure that we cover all of them that apply to everybody. And if they're specific to a student or a family, we'll definitely follow up. The second item is, as always, we'll be sharing a recorded version of this webinar as a follow-up tomorrow, as well as some of the resources that we mention on today's webinar. But let me turn it over to Lisa Bain Carlton to get us going on this important topic.
Well, welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here. I think this is one of the topics we cover that is a little more confusing to people. And I think it's become, one is I think it's hard, it's something that's out of the students' kind of general things that they're used to doing. So as we talk about this today, I really do encourage questions because I think it's not as known, kind of how to work demonstrated interest, what that really means. And we're gonna try to reframe that a little bit. But I put on here, what if someone told you by doing a few easy activities, you could raise your test score by 200 points? Would you do it? I'm guessing most of you would, knowing students and how much they hate test prep. So I'm guessing you would. My point here is that demonstrated interest is becoming increasingly more important, for sure. And it is something that holds a significant weight varies by college, but definitely can hold a significant weight in this process. And I would say, before I kind of define it, I would also say, if I look at the last season, I can see kids who showed demonstrated interest in their results, and some of them overperformed. And I can see students that underperformed, and really they never engaged with their colleges. Because really, well, I'm going to give you the formal definition of demonstrated interest, which is it's the way you show a college that if they accept you, there's a good chance you may enroll. So in other words, the college wants to know that you are genuinely interested in them and that you actually might attend. Now, colleges have to have ways of doing that. But before we talk about that, I want to just reframe this a little bit. It's an engagement, if you will. So as we talk about this today, demonstrated interest is actually relational because it's you trying to get to know the college and the college trying to get to know you, right? Now, that's going to vary a lot, whether it's a little bitty college like Smith College, Whitman College, little colleges versus, University of Texas at Austin. However, we do know that University of Texas at Austin does track, whether you visited and those kind of things. It's authentic. In other words, it's genuine. It's not, I'm trying to check this off the box. It's like, I really want to know more about this college. Hence, it's also specific. In other words, if Bryn was to show interest to a college and I was to show interest to a college, it probably wouldn't be the same thing because we might not have the same interest, okay? So at the end of the day, this is really how you engage with the college. And sadly, many students choose to create a college list, but then don't engage with the college. And we've seen this year, then students, depending on what colleges you get in, how well do you know all your colleges? It is incredibly important that you're engaging with your colleges. And it's also never been easier. If there's one thing COVID did, it made this piece a little bit easier. And I would say demonstrated interest is such a great life skill, parents. So this is something where you might have to help your student a little bit, but it teaches the exact same skills you're going to use when you look for an internship, when you look for a job, all of those things. How do I communicate effectively? How do I ask good questions. How do I do my research before? So I'm actually asking a good question. How do I follow up appropriately? How do I say thank you? All those things that you're actually going to use. So part of we've never done a webinar on this, but there's really two reasons we did it. One is we saw so many students, just no matter how many times we would say this, they weren't doing it. So we thought, let's all come together and talk about why this is important. And this is on the students. Like, we can't do this for you. This has to be you. Your parents can't do this for you. This has to be you. We can all support you and give you the tools that you need. One of the things that the step before demonstrated interest is that you've got to have done rigorous research on your college. And I think this class has done a really, really great job at that. We changed how we do research on colleges, and research on colleges, like all parts of the process, comes easier to some students than others. But one of the things this is a two-way street. Our students, our seniors right now, are on the other side of the street now. Right now, it feels like it's all about you wanting them, right? Like, you want to go there and you want them to want you. But there will also be a moment when it's, do you want to go there or not, right? It shifts, okay? And that's what the colleges are trying to predict when they are looking at demonstrated interest. They're trying to figure out, if this student has never come to one of our online sessions, and we have 2 a day, and they have never come to any event, and we went to their school and there was a virtual college fair and they never stopped by there, and they never opened one of our emails, how would they think you're interested in them? Like, other than the fact that you applied, like, and that actually is not enough. So first step is rigorous research. And this is the spot where you are the winner, because you get to determine, do I actually have any interest to keep going with this? You're not saying you're going to attend there, but do I want to continue to research this? And I think one of the things that has happened with students is that I think burnout is real right now, right? And you guys have been in school, COVID school, and online and offline and every other possible derivation of that. Your parents are working from home, they're tired. And so you kind of just want to lock in a college list and have that done, check it off the list again. But you might go there. That's the thing, you might go there. So let this demonstrated interest benefit you in terms of helping you get in, but also benefit you in terms of learning about your colleges, so that maybe you go to their session and you're like, ooh, I really didn't like that. Or, oh, I love that. I want to learn more about it. And so you follow up. That's the back and forth that's woven in this, that can help you even more than how it's going to help you in terms of admissions, even more than if it were to drop 200 points in your lap. Okay.
Lisa mentioned how many students have been engaged in completing this college research worksheet, and it has a section. If you could talk to the school, what questions would you have? And we always encourage students to make sure that they have opinions of their school. I know that sounds obvious, but it isn't just 1 or 2 schools on your list that you're super excited about. As we talked about in our last webinar, it's really about having a balanced college list. And we found that almost every student that we work with actually has a question. Is this program really as good as what I'm expecting? Could you tell me a little bit more about this opportunity for undergraduate research, this club? And so it really is a good indicator that a student has done that rigorous research when they know the questions that they honestly want to have answered, or what they want to look for either on an on-campus tour or an online virtual session.
Now, we've been over this a number of times if you've come to any of our other webinars and just working with us one-on-one. When we look at how a college reads a student, and every college doesn't read a student the same. So this is general and couldn't be, it's not, but I think it's, definitely in the ballpark for colleges. they're first looking at your academics, right? So you have to have the grades and the test scores. If you came to our highly selective session, the throwing the big pass, down the lane, if you really don't match up academically, was probably a lot of work in vain that would have been better spent on a college you're actually interested in. But let's say you have all those things, because our goal is that the majority of your college list you're academically going to match up to. That's an easier thing to kind of figure out, right? Like those are numbers and you can see their bands and things like that. The bottom half of this list is where things get real interesting and where decisions are made, I think. I mean, in other words, like once you get past that, what is the student's resume, which we spend a lot of time talking about activity? What is the student's major? In other words, like one thing we've seen is like computer science, business, some of those majors. X school might look like it's very much within your reach, but when you add in a super competitive major, we're talking about a different school, which a student might say, we get these calls sometimes like, why is this school on my students listed so much? And it's like, well, actually that program at that school is way more selective than the whole university, right? So there's a lot of nuance in here. Two pieces on the right play into each other. Demonstrated interest has that student been on our radar in any way, and we're going to talk about the ways that is. And then I'm going to say essays are also in that, because most colleges, or many, let's say, have an essay, why our college. Now, I write my why college essay. I really like X college because it's a small college and I'm looking forward to getting to know my professors, and the campus is beautiful. We could send that to most small liberal arts colleges in this country and it would fit. As an admissions officer, what that tells me is either you don't know anything about my college, or you haven't taken the time to really dig into what's different about this college versus this college. Versus, I'm really interested in X college's program and why, and I'm especially looking forward to doing there. And when I visited the campus, did the virtual session, whatever, I was in other words, you have something to draw on. So your why essay is one of your biggest ways to show interest, and yet students universally hate why essays. And the reason that students hate why essays is because it requires them to do research to know. Our goal this year has been to try to help our students get to know their colleges better, which in turn would make that essay easier. But if you ask a college admissions person, that why essay, everybody focuses on the long essay and is it good enough or whatever. If college X is in a competitive admissions trying to figure out if they're going to bring you in, the why essay is a way more likely essay to be read, because is this student a match for our school? And you have got to let them know that you are, and you can't do that if you don't know enough about them. So both the essay process and demonstrated interest, they play off each other, and you can't write a very good essay if you haven't engaged with the college. And if you engage with the college, you will have shown interest. You know what I'm saying? So it all is a circle. Anything you guys want to add there?
Just one thing I want to add, and that is we've said in earlier webinars that, as Lisa said, the GPA, the transcript, beyond just the GPA, is obviously a key component of whether or not the student has a reach, possible, or match. And we do want to reiterate that a large percentage of schools that are on students' list will continue to be test optional this year. So just a reminder on that.
Oh, good. Thank you. And I think we've already said this. It does seem that it's becoming increasingly important in the process, demonstrated interest. I think the fact that colleges now are offering virtual sessions, it is really easy to do this. And if you really can't, give them 45 minutes, that says something, and so that is important. And we do, like I said, I can see on decisions this year where students underperformed, and I'll be like, so like, and oh no, I actually never got around, and this is not something, we have students keep data on this, but this is really in the student's court to do this. And I think it shows, we're talking about launching to college. And I would say, students, that this is a little uncomfortable. Sometimes it is, because you haven't had to email a lot of people and you haven't had to put yourself out there. And sometimes the person doesn't return your email and that feels really gross. And so, I mean, it is not super comfortable, but it definitely separates the groups a little bit, those who do that and those who don't. And genuine, we go back to, it's got to be authentic, genuine. Your parents can't do this for you because it'll sound like your parents did it for you. Do you know what I'm saying? And admissions officers can smell that a mile away, just like with essays. So this really does have to be on the students, and it's a good indicator of things. Why is demonstrated interest so important? Because it does give that chance for the dialogue, and both the colleges everyone's trying to figure out. I used to use a dating metaphor with this. It's like, are we a good match, right? Is this a good fit? I've got to get to know you a little bit. You've got to get to know me a little bit for us to know that. And so that's how the college process is. And even for a big anonymous university, a school like Michigan loves interest. Michigan loves you to come visit. But pre-COVID, if a student was, deferred in Michigan and dying to go, I'd be like, fly up there. And it works like a charm. Assuming that they were within the band. In other words, they like interest because they want to know if students are genuinely interested in them. And so I think it's in everyone's best interest.
So we're going to jump in here and talk specifically for students and for parents, but specifically for students on, okay, we've sort of enforced to you how important this is. Now, what do I do? I understand this is crucial for me to communicate to the schools I want to go to, that I want to go there, that the time to demonstrated interest is not after you got waitlist or deferred. The time to demonstrate interest is now. So who do you want to be in that demonstrating interest? As Lisa said, there's some really good things around authenticity and specificity and relationship, but I think there's some even more detailed stuff that we want to talk about. The first one, and I think every student would do this, is to be polite, to utilize language that is the kind of language that an adult or a young adult uses, and to think of it as a great indication of who you are. Conversational language, hey you, not really the best approach here in terms of engaging with a busy admissions rep. The second one is to be considerate of their time. We oftentimes hear from admissions reps that while they love to hear demonstrated interest, it sometimes frustrates them if they feel like a student is just regurgitating a question they could have easily understood from the website. And so we encourage students to be really considerate of the rep's time, and to build on that, to be genuinely curious. As Lisa said, this rigorous research is the foundation for demonstrated interest. In some ways, it's almost demonstrated research. You're demonstrating the fact that you've dove deep into the school and you have a real good sense of the specific questions based on that research that you want to see if you can get answered. Being conscientious, spelling, grammar. Thank God for Grammarly. I think it saves everybody every day. Be accurate. Make sure you get the school's name right. Be careful, and Lisa's pointed this out so many times, not to just cut and paste a note from another. We jokingly heard an admissions rep say, I got a beautiful email from a student indicating interest in this school half an hour down the road from my school. They're not going to pass that email along to a colleague. So try to make sure you're accurate. And then finally, try to make sure you're current. And this is a pro tip for all kids. You're going to want to know who the admissions rep is if they have a state or Austin specific admissions rep. They're going to be the person that you want to communicate with. Lisa, anything to add in terms of how a student can be their best?
I think in your written communication, there's a fine line between in other words, you don't want to do, hey girl, how's it going, right? On the other hand, you're 17, and sometimes I see things that just look so adult that it looks like it didn't come from the student. So it should be genuinely authentic and of a, student of your age. It just should be respectful. And I'm going to invite Bryn, if you have anything to add. Bryn has been an admissions rep. So is there anything, I know she's shared funny stories with us. So, I mean, I just think we'd be missing an opportunity here if I didn't ask you to, add in or accentuate anything that you want to add.
Yeah, I think that it is the polite, courteous, and the beginning, middle, and end of an email is always great. So start with the hello and end with the thank you, and have your message in between, because oftentimes we would get emails that were one sentence and that was it. Can you tell me about this? Well, no, I can't. I need to know more. And include your name. Do not assume that by your email we might know who you are. I think a first and last name is really helpful. If you're willing to throw in your high school name, that is also really helpful, just to make sure that it is being tracked properly. And if I may, please have an appropriate email address. Your school one is usually wonderful, but if you do have a personal email is what I'm trying to say, let's just double check that it's appropriate. And that's probably where I'll leave that one.
That's great. So Brandon and Lisa pointed out a couple of sort of mistakes that students have made that we've seen. One of the first ones is only showing interest at your reach school. I am a student who is UT or bust, Michigan or bust, Loyola Marymount or bust. And I don't really think I need to show interest in a school that's a match or a possible. You want options. This coming year, you want as many great options as you can find. And so make sure you're demonstrating interest at all the schools on your balanced list, not just your reach schools. When you're at virtual or in-person events, if they visit your high school, if you tour the college, if you get a chance to go to a virtual session, engage, ask questions. It's natural. You definitely will have questions. Share those questions. We reiterated this point before. Try not to ask questions that they easily could answer on their website. Lisa mentioned this. Parents, a college is going to assume that you're interested in every school that your son or daughter applies to. And so please, 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 we beg you, don't take the lead in demonstrating interest. As Lisa said, it comes through clear, it comes through obvious, and it's not consistent with a student owning this process, and particularly at this critical stage. And then Lisa said this at the beginning, this is not simply checking a box. As Brent pointed out, every admissions rep in America, every admissions rep globally can tell when you're phoning it in. This is the time to step up and actually show that interest.
And one other thing I wanted to add there is on your just showing your reach schools, remember that we're also trying to both get information here. And so if you just choose a few of your schools to show interest to, you don't know anything about, you've missed the opportunity, I should say, to learn additional information and fill in gaps on schools that you may be attending. And one of you guys said it, I think Bob said it, which was, don't wait till you're deferred or waitlisted and then, ping us, hey, you guys, I gotta find the rep. I never heard of them before. That's not your best. It's way better. Let's think about this a minute. Let's hope this doesn't happen, but let's say you get waitlisted at a school that you've been engaging with. You've already engaged with that person. You're already on the radar. That's a way better spot to be in than if you have never had any contact. So that the depth of the list is both important from showing the interest, but it's also important for you. And I think it's a critical mistake students are making is they're missing doing that whole list. And I mean, by the time the season's over, y'all are going to be sick of the word balance, but we're really doing you a favor here. I mean, because that is critically important.
One observation to make here, God forbid, but the letter a student sends if they've been waitlisted or deferred is called a letter of continued interest. That letter of continued interest explicitly indicates they demonstrated interest. So it's important, as Lisa talked about it, to start that dialogue, both so a student can understand that the school is a fit, and so that the school can understand that the student's a fit, that they're offering admissions to a student, or at least considering offering admissions to a student who's interested in going to their school. They're not just a placeholder.
And
okay.
Sorry, there was one of them. I'm sorry, there's so much on this. What if you do make a mistake? I have definitely had students make the cut and paste in the wrong college, whatever. You're learning here. You haven't done a lot of communication like this, which is, I think, why sometimes parents want to get over involved, because it is new. But I will say that most of the time when that was genuine and a student genuinely made a mistake and then genuinely went back and apologized and, you know, whatever, and it's mainly worked out. So I don't want you to be so worried that you've got to have this perfect. You're going to make some mistakes in this process because you've never done this before. And remember, this is human. So if you do make a mistake, most of them can be fixed. So because I think we don't want to get everything's got to be perfect. Therefore, 8 adults need to be involved in this, because 8 adults are not going to help this. They're really not. So I just wanted to add that.
Lisa, could you talk a little bit about this most confusing word in college admissions, optional?
Sure. So if Bren's laughing, there's no such word as optional in college admissions, other than maybe right now I would say tests. So tests are optional, but and they seem to be truly optional. So that's good news. But or if there's like a legal question and you haven't had any problems with the law, you just say no and keep going. But other than that, optional means you have an opportunity. Optional is opportunity, right? So it gives you a chance to show them something else. How many times, Allison, in the writing process do kids say, oh no, I didn't write that because it was optional, I don't want to?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then we say, yes, would you like to continue to apply to that school?
Right.
We recommend that you write that one.
Exactly. So, but what I want to try to help you guys see is that's your chance to show another thing about yourself. So while it is a little bit more work, right, it also allows you to show some other things, because you know what? A lot of kids will take it as optional and they won't do it. Yes. So you will shine. And that's what we want. I mean, if you can't muster, this is what I always say to students, if you can't muster up the energy to do a 250-word optional, why in the world is that college on your list?
Exactly.
There's no reason for that college to be on your list. If you're so, and that's fine. We are all of us, our whole team, we expect changes in college list, and often it does come when we're applying, because they're just like, I cannot even think of anything to write. And it's like, okay, that's some important information actually. So this process actually works. You know what I'm saying? In other words, it's working for you too, because sometimes you get some good information there. But if you like the school, optional is not optional.
So some examples of demonstrated interest, and we've just captured some here. Emailing with the college admissions rep, and I think we mentioned that, find the name, have something tangible to ask, unique to you, specific. We've been so excited this year how many students have joined virtual information sessions. Just this past week, a student opened up a spreadsheet and shared with me all the notes she had taken from the virtual information session. And she said to me, I want to drop these 3 schools because I demonstrated my interest, and my interest isn't there anymore because I'm not interested in that school. That's great. There's plenty of time to replace those 3 schools on a student's balanced college list. We mentioned before, if an admissions rep is visiting your high school, either in person or virtually, and that school is either on your list or a school that you're still considering, take the time, Make good on that opportunity to meet with them in person, to meet them virtually. And then to send them a follow-up email, ask them specific questions. If possible, when you visit the school, see if there's an opportunity to interview with the school. If you visit, see if there's an opportunity to attend a class. We have had a couple of students who actually had taken advantage of the opportunity to attend a class virtually. If offered an admissions interviews, and these are sometimes really difficult to see in the process, but if offered the alumni interview, take it. Join the mailing list and follow the college on social media. Bryn did a recent blog post that was fabulous on how a student can visit social media to get sort of a more realistic feel of a student's perception of the school. Newsflash, as we say in the bottom, Stanford's not going to care if you click on the links in their email or not. And then finally, if you have a special skill, if you're an athlete, a musician, a studio artist, make sure you're engaged with the appropriate individual. And finally, and we would say honestly, chief among the areas to demonstrated interest is to apply early. I had a family the other day say, can you tell me how we'll decide which schools to apply early to? And my answer is, we will help you decide by telling you, unless you're not ready, you will apply early to every school. A, it's a great way to indicate to the school your demonstrated interest. B, every high school junior in America deserves to have a great fall, a return to whatever the next normal is. And to do that, let's get those applications submitted early, not desperately, not before they're ready, but applying early is always a positive. Lisa, any other examples of demonstrated interest to add here?
No, I would say there has been a little confusion because, of course, we've never had all this virtual stuff before, and every college does it differently, a little more differently than I would say they do admissions events on campus pre-COVID. So ideally, you want to do things that you have to sign up for, okay? Because otherwise, like if you're just doing, like a lot of them have the virtual tours and things, which some of them are really good. And so you should do that to learn more about the college. But when you're wanting to do things that get tracked for interest, you need to have signed up for it. And so that's a good indicator to know, is this going to actually be tracked? Now that, like I said, part of your research might be to go online and take that tour to see if you like it. One other thing that I'll say, because I think there's a lot of confusion around this, you want to contact, well, a coach could do this, but most of the things, if you're like contacting, you know, the marine biology department to learn more about the marine biology department, that's awesome. That's a great way for you to learn what that major is like. That probably has no impact, which surprises people, on at many schools on your application, because there's not much communication, much less than people think, between admissions and academic departments. I mean, we have a lot of UT parents who are kind of sadly shocked by that. You know, there really is very, you know, well, why, someone asked me recently, well, why isn't the business school noticing this? And I'm like, because the business school isn't reviewing this, right? Like, so I think, and sometimes that can hurt. You're like, I did all that work and they're not, you know, but it is the admissions department that handles admissions. So the coach, now a coach can help move things forward if, you know, but those are, but why do we put those in demonstrated interest? Because when you go to write that why essay and you actually know more about this school because you took the time to talk to the marine biology department, the music department, the coach, the whatever, that's going to come through. So that's important. And sometimes it's after that contact that you then have a question for admission. So again, all this kind of goes in a circle. And like Bob said, there is, you know, applying early is definitely a helpful thing. I would say the one place where we sometimes hold back on applying early, one, you're not ready, or two, if you had a really bumpy junior year. So if you had a really bumpy junior year, it's sometimes better to show those fall grades, but that's usually like 1 or 2 students per year. You know, it's not many. Waiting is not well, for 1,000 reasons, which we'll get to it when we do our orientation on applying, but it is a great way to show interest, to go on and get that application in there too. But I would say there is a little bit of a hierarchy of these, and Bryn, jump in if you might, is that these things are not all weighted the same way. So they use a software, and these things are weighted, and each college is weighting them differently. So we can't say, oh, this is, but in the old world, pre-COVID, coming and visiting a college, especially if you're a little bit far away, is definitely a big show of interest. Now, the beautiful thing is, maybe you can't go, maybe you're looking at all colleges in New England. That's a long way from Austin. And so if you were to, really engage in their online activities, they're going to see that and like it. But I do want to just say, like, sometimes kids will be, well, I sent them an email, okay, like the idea is our students aren't applying to that many colleges. You should be able to engage with them. You're thinking of spending 4 years there, and your parents are thinking of spending a whole lot of money for it. Bryn, would you add anything to the hierarchy of?
Yeah, I think that the email, like just sending the email, that kind of attitude is not high up there in the hierarchy, but sending that personal email. Thank you so much for the visit today at my high school. Really enjoyed it. I had a follow-up question. That really does make a difference. And I think that the piece here we forget is the admissions office is looking to admit, and it doesn't feel like that right now, especially if you're listening to all the media, and they're looking to admit, and that admissions rep is your advocate in the admissions process. And so getting to know them with those sincere emails, or if you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with them, interview or not, but just a one-on-one meeting where you're getting FaceTime, or going back to those virtual or in-person, coming to your high school, all of that FaceTime makes a big difference. I advocated for a lot of students because I got to know them that on paper maybe have been borderline or even below what our typical admitted student would be, but I could advocate for them because I knew their story, because I knew what was going on. I knew the context behind them and their sincerity in coming. And so I think if we treat all of these as almost like ways to advocate for yourself so that your admissions person can then advocate on your behalf, I think that might help think about what it is that you as the student can be doing that best fits you too.
And I think Bryn makes a really important point in the COVID world. So interviews pre-COVID were becoming kind of less and less, except at the really small schools, right? But now that everything's gone virtual, there's a lot of like ability to ask students questions, ability to go on and ask, so there's a lot more opportunities. And my hunch is those are going to stay. One, because of budgets. I mean, it's much more cost effective for the colleges. And why do you think we saw a 20%? One of the reasons we saw a 20% increase in applications, one is test optional. Another one is because the students that got to engage, and it was a more even playing field because maybe I don't have the money to fly to wherever to visit all these colleges. You can engage in all your colleges virtually now. So yeah, I think it is really important that sometimes I notice students just with this is like, okay, great, I'll do the one thing. Like if you approach this as though you're just checking something off the list, you're missing the point, which is one of the reasons we wanted to have this session. Yeah.
So I have a question. I have students who will say to me, well, I emailed the rep and they never emailed me back. Now what do I do? Am I supposed to email them again? Or now am I pestering them? Do I know that? So, Bryn, what's the guidance for students if this is an engagement and not just checking a box? What should they do?
Email one more time, because they're getting hundreds of these emails a day, and many of them are insincere, but they still have to try to respond to all of them. I think that as an admissions person, I was spending 8 hours a day reading applications, but I still was responsible for my emails and my phone calls and my meetings and so unfortunately things would get lost. I might delete a voicemail and not be able to get it back. I might delete emails and didn't realize I deleted something I didn't respond to. Human error. And so give your admissions person enough grace to try one more time. Now, not everybody is going to respond. there's also that piece of it. You should be getting a bounce back. So if the bounce back saying, we're in the middle of reading season, we're really busy, you probably shouldn't expect a response, but hope that it's been read. So it's that kind of piece. I wouldn't pester. If you do have an important question you're not getting an answer to and you've tried twice, try another admissions person in that office and just very kindly say, I tried to reach out to my rep. I'm sure they're very busy, but could you please help me answer this question, right? And often that'll prompt that admissions rep to email you back. But I think remembering that we're human and that they're working just as hard as you're working on your applications, they're working just as hard to read them and do all of that. That can be a really tough spot to be in. So great question, Allison.
And I would say there is okay, so there's colleges that are just getting so many applications. So as we go up the selective, where the most selective colleges genuinely are at the point where they can't respond. In other words, there's so many, you know what I'm saying? So there does sometimes, that doesn't mean that it hasn't been read. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been, put under your whatever. But it isn't always feasible, I guess is what I'm saying. I mean, I talked to a director of admissions at a competitive school, and she was saying, literally my people are just so worn out. Like they cannot do this. The increase that we saw in applications was so hard on admissions people. So I think it's not lost just because they didn't respond is, but I do agree with Bryn. I would give it 2 times and then I would let it go. Yeah. Or call. I know students hate to pick up the phone and call, but that can also be a good way to do it, just to call and someone answers. Like if you're calling UT, they're actually super helpful. If you have a genuine question, they're very helpful. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about college visits. Prior to COVID, as Lisa mentioned, this was a large part, particularly in the spring and summer of a student's junior or senior year, of researching colleges. Obviously, COVID shifted all of that to virtual. As this spring semester has gone on, schools have begun, some of them, to open up on-campus tours. You can obviously find them on the school's admissions website. There's a link here that we'll put in the chat box for the 7 steps to setting up the visit. You'll obviously want to check and see if the school is actually hosting those tours this summer or even early fall. We always encourage families to try to prioritize geographic clusters. There's nothing more challenging than starting your college tour in Seattle and ending it in Miami. That can be exhausting, particularly for students that have had a tough junior year to begin with. And if a student is still unsure about the size of the school, Texas offers a whole host of large, extra large, medium, and small schools for students to spend an afternoon really trying it on and getting a feel. We've mentioned this before, but we do encourage students to go beyond the standard information session if they happen to be touring on campus, to avail themselves of the opportunity to hear a student panel if it's offered, or to visit an academic program that they're curious about. We do have our guide to campus tours, and we'll share that in the follow-up note to all of you as a follow-up to this, including the recording of this webinar.
And I would say one thing I encourage is that I think this class has it so hard because they've literally seen almost the vast majority of them have not seen colleges almost at all. While we normally are huge fans of trying to get on campus when there's students there, I feel like we have students who just need to step on a college campus and see what a tour is and just get a little more context, because it's really hard to just do. They've never been to college and we're asking them to do all this. So I do encourage, if you can, you're not going to do your whole college list. That's not realistic, but getting on some campuses that your student is interested in this summer, if you can, it's also going to make their writing so much better because they will have physically seen the college. Again, you want to vary that. While it's tempting to go to the top most reached school on there, we really encourage you to vary your visits through that whole list. That's going to be important because your student could be going to, a variety of schools on the list.
Here's some conversation starters for students. We oftentimes, when we meet with students, suggest to them if they ask us about demonstrated interest. Obviously, we're not tracking it for them. This is something that all students track themselves. But if they're saying, I'm really struggling, if they're looking at a school in Maine, finding out how many students from Texas attend that school in Maine, that's totally okay if a student is applying to a school far away from home. If they're applying to a smaller college town, trying to find out what the sort of gown in town relationship is. What kind of relationship does the college or university have with the surrounding town or city? If a student is interested in a specific major, trying to see if they can connect with someone or finding out if there are any new programs scheduled for the next 4 years. So Lisa mentioned before also that one of the innovations of a shift to virtual is there has been an explosion of opportunities that admissions departments sometimes offer for students to connect to another student, a college student, to get more information either about the experience of attending that school or a specific major. These conversation starters aren't Mad Libs, they're not a template, but they are a way to consider how to start the conversation. And Lisa, you made the observation, and I wish you'd share, that sometimes this can be particularly challenging for introverts. How should an introvert approach demonstrated interest?
Well, I think that there's a lot in this process that is the friend of an introvert. And I think number one, use those strong research skills that many introverted students have to really think about memorable questions to ask. For a college fair, so we do not have in-person college fairs right now, but I mean, even myself, I cannot stand to walk into a college fair at the very beginning of it. It's just so stressful. So I used to tell my students, like, wait till, halfway through and then go, because it's going to clear out a lot. Email, most of our introverts are super comfortable with email, and most of our communication happens via email. So you're good there. And then request to perhaps sit in on a class. So maybe you don't want to go up to students and ask them questions, but you could observe what's happening with students by going into a class. So that's always a good option.
We want to sort of wrap up and cover any questions at the end, but we want to sort of wrap up with where we started, that for students, now is the time to engage and show colleges what kind of student you'll be there. Colleges want to admit engaged, intellectually curious students. You have an advantage, as Lisa said, that opportunity to metaphorically add 200 points to a test simply by doing what comes naturally, which is to demonstrated interest in that school. And then it's also the opportunity for schools to really understand, is this a student who wants to say yes to me? And as Lisa mentioned, assume that the school is tracking that. Finally, we want to be really specific in terms of historically, when have students done this? Adding this to a student's to-do list right now when they're struggling with how to wrap up the semester is just, for some students, the straw that breaks the camel back. Most students wait until their junior year is ramped up, and they make this a priority from June through September of their senior year. And we'll be sharing with each student, if we haven't already, this simple tracking spreadsheet that we've created, so the student can keep track of whether or not they've attended a virtual information session, if they've been lucky enough to visit on campus in person. Did they contact the reps? Specifically, do they have the rep's email address? One note that Bryn mentioned, sometimes the admissions rep may change. And so if you don't hear back, just checking on the website to see if they've changed. All of these aspects, and sometimes students say, well, I've done one. And our answer is, it's like Lisa said, it's a dialogue. It's not spam, it's a relationship. And so trying to make sure that you're nurturing that relationship. We heard from an admissions rep who said, if you can say anything to the student, tell them, I'd like to get to know them before I receive their application. If they can demonstrate interest, I think, oh my God, I remember getting that email from Gabby. or I remember getting that email from Ben. And so trying to make sure that this is a dialogue, a relationship, a discussion, because that's the kind of student that colleges want to admit. We have a couple of minutes left today, and so we want to open it up and see if anyone has any questions that we haven't covered in our session today.
We have a great question that came in, and I don't even know how to answer this, so I'm so excited to hear what you guys might have to say. The question is, questions during a live admission session can be tricky. Sometimes it's too little context, or you can be too long-winded. Are there any tips to right-sizing your question when you're in a virtual admission setting? It's a great question, isn't it?
Well, I think you want to have a question that's not like it's if you have something that's like really personal to you, it's you are walking a tricky line because you don't want to ask the question that's like so obvious. But you could say, for example, I'm interested in studying accounting. Could you give some examples of internships that students get in accounting and overall internships? You know what I'm saying? So that thing gives the rep the opportunity to kind of not just speak to accounting, but to also kind of get your question in there. I think that's really important. Yeah, that is a good question.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I'm going to mention is when you're on campuses, some of our students have had real, and I've learned from students because we learn a lot from you guys. And so I had a student that every time she went to a campus, when she finished her tour or whatever, she would go in the admissions office and just ask if the Texas rep was around. Could she introduce herself? She didn't expect to spend 20 minutes with them. Of course she didn't get, maybe she got half of them, I don't know. But like for the ones she got, it really made an impression. Like she just introduced herself, And so that's going to depend on 1,000 things. Admissions reps aren't always housed in the same place where you check in for admission, but it's certainly one, you got to be creative here, and so in those instances, so ways that you can do that. And of course, in the super selective schools, you're going to find that the admissions rep is sometimes, the person at the desk is a little bit of a gatekeeper, so that's not going to happen. But that could happen at many, because remember, selective schools are not, it's a small percentage of this whole pie of colleges. So, there's many, many schools where that could happen.
Lisa, we have one last question. One of the parents asked, is it appropriate to ask an admissions rep at one school about another college or program just because these folks are so connected? Is that appropriate?
No. Bryn is shaking her head. No, you've got to do your homework. No, you go visit this college and you learn about the program, and you go visit that college and you learn about the program, right? That work is on you. And what that communicates, if you ask them, I would definitely not do that. I think it is, yes, inappropriate. One other thing on this slide that I think is so important is we say June through September. Usually students start this they want to wait a long time to do this. Don't do that, because what if you go do these things and you find out that you actually don't like this school, and you're going to write and do all these things. So early summer is a great time to start doing your interest, and last minute interest, because you start panicking after you got waitlisted at early action, is not the best time to start showing your interest.
Lisa,
I had a student. Oh, go ahead.
We got one last question, and that is it appropriate for the student to mention her GPA, her SAT score, to even attach her resume to an email to the admissions rep when they ask a question?
Bryn, I'm throwing that one to you.
So in an introduction email, it's okay to say those things. Hello, my name is such and such. I go to XYZ high school. My GPA is da da da. I would withhold test score if you're not sure if you're going to send your test score, but your GPA is going. So, so share that if you'd like to as part of your introduction, and absolutely put your resume in there if you'd like. But it's not just an introduction email. There has to be a reason for a contact back. So here's my introduction. Here's who I am. I had a question about your program in such and such. Could you please answer XYZ? that kind of thing. So there's like a call and response, right? And that kind of idea. So I want you to be able to respond back to me. In future emails, I would not continuously say that. You could say, my name is, Bryn Campbell from XYZ High School. And just that way they have that information as part of being able to figure out, because there could be a lot of Bryn Campbells out there. And so that piece is helpful, but I would not continuously introduce once you've kind of done that piece of it. So.
Lisa, another question just came in. How could a student become aware of the opportunity for alumni interviews?
So most alumni interviews, there's check boxes when you apply often. And then many alumni interviews, which those are, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would say alumni interviews are mainly at the pretty selective schools. A lot of times you apply and then you get invited. And so that is something to watch, because their policies change on these interview things. It seems like every year. So you need to, again, be watching your college's website on the interview page. There's Rice, I can't remember, they've changed the way they do it so many times, I can't remember how they do it, but it's a tricky way that they do it. So yeah, you need to stay on top of that. But many of those alumni interviews you're going to get offered, if you have the choice, and you often don't, you would rather talk to an admissions person than talk to an alumni interview. An alumni interview is a way for them to offer a nicety. They are rarely evaluative, have much weight. You're way better if you could meet with, the ideal is that person who's going to read your application, right? And right now, I do think there are opportunities to jump on. And again, they're not going to call them interviews, because I think adults and students have really different ideas of what an interview is. College interviews, very few of them are evaluative in nature. They're really about showing interest. And I mean, now if you say something super offensive or like really bad, they're real evaluative. But I mean, assuming that you stay in the middle road here, they're really a way for you to show interest and for the college to let you learn more about them, right? It's about having that human relationship. They're not overly formal. I remember once a mom coming in and we were getting into about nail polish color for the interview, like that's not really the thing, these are 17-year-olds. So now of course you don't want to, you don't need to dress up like Sunday best, and you don't also need to, come inappropriate either. But so alumni interviews are going to be different at every college, how you sign up for them, and interviews in general, and they change all the time. But I think what Bryn offered, which is important to know, is you can sometimes just get on a FaceTime with them. You don't have to have this formal, can I set up a formal interview, yeah.
Well, we sure appreciate everybody's time this afternoon on this crucial topic. We will be following up with a recording of this and a link to the resources that we mentioned. We hope you have a great rest of the day, and we're so encouraged by the progress that students are making. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye now.